facing one of the biggest threats in human history.
Welcome to ASEAN People Speak, Season 4. I am Regine Jessica Dumrique Abuel, your host for this podcast. For our seventh and final episode, we will be talking about the vital role of civil society and grassroots communities in championing environmental protection. Joining us today is someone who has been at the forefront of this movement. He is currently the East Asia and ASEAN Program Manager of Forum Asia, where he leads a portfolio of research and advocacy for East Asia and Southeast Asian countries. He also works to share activists' demands and stories by providing them a place to campaign, communicate, and build networks. He values meaningful participation and collective power as a tool to protect human rights for all. Everyone, let us all welcome from Indonesia, Cornelius Damar Hanung. Hello, Hanung. Thank you so much for being with us today. How are you there in Indonesia?
I'm good. Thanks, Regine. Thanks so much for the opportunity to having me today for this podcast. I think it's a really amazing opportunity for me and Forum Asia to showcase our work as well and to share our insight for this episode and for this podcast as well.
Of course, we're very much honored to have you with us today as well. So, I guess to start off everything, I just want to ask you the important question. First, could you share with us, Hanong, the role of civil society and grassroots organizations in advocating for environmental protection? Why do you think the efforts of these organizations or groups, why do you think are they crucial in the ASEAN region?
I always, I'm always a firm believer of civil society because we are at the forefront of the work, and especially those who are at the grassroots level, because they are having the proximity with those who are the most affected by the environmental degradations and those who are experiencing the effect of harmful business activities, which very often are located in a place where there are limited access of informations and connectivity, in which sometimes the effect of the environmental degradations and the business activities are left unheard. So the roles of civil societies and the grassroots communities in these situations are very crucial to amplify the voices, the concerns. The role of the civil society itself actually varies. For example, CSOs like Forum Asia and its members have works on documenting the use of repressive laws in the context of civic space and fundamental freedoms and human rights violations against environmental human rights defenders or EHRDs in the context of environmental degradations. Other CSOs can provide direct legal assistance to the affected communities, and others doing campaign to echo with their the grassroots communities' voices by doing campaigns, or even provide emergency assistance for the environmental human rights defenders at risk. So we can imagine there are lots of potentials and works that
Yes,
CSOs can do on the ground. So
yes.
that's why the roles are very important.
Yes, and I actually want to touch upon what you mentioned a while ago that the proximity that you mentioned, there are certain groups, of course, that are affected right away. And it's good that you've mentioned that there are different civil society organizations who work in different ways, not just in a very structured way. Some give legal aid, some, for example, do documentation of cases, some do advocacies, promotion, and awareness. And this is very nice because it's a holistic approach in dealing with environmental problems. Do you think CSOs are very crucial or very important, not just, for example, in one country? Do you think they're also equally important in the ASEAN region?
I couldn't agree more with that, because we as an ASEAN community, I would say, are very interconnected for
Yes,
one and another. Because if we talk about the environmental degradations and business activities, it is very much connected than we ever imagined. Because business activities in one country might be conducted by a business that comes from investment from different countries. So there
correct.
is an
Yes.
interconnectedness happening there with lots of
I guess the concept of
inter-investment.
transboundary,
Yeah,
yes,
what
transboundary
you call
harm.
transboundaries. Exactly.
Yes. Exactly. So I think CSOs that are not just confined specifically in a country. There are many CSOs also in the ASEAN region that work within the region itself because of what you've mentioned, that certain businesses, for example, are established in one country, but the environmental effects of this business affect other adjacent or neighboring countries, and so it affects a lot of people. So the CSOs are responsible for not just documenting but also providing legal aid, but also doing these advocacies and promotion across borders. So thank you very much for pointing that out, Hanong. Since we've talked about civil society organizations, I'd like to ask you now and switch to the other side. How do you think public participation in general, especially community-led initiatives, help shape environmental policies at the local, so maybe in the country level and at the regional levels?
I would say when we talk about public participations, I would like to frame it as a meaningful public participations where
Yes.
the voice of the people of ASEAN itself is really heard and really
Yeah.
being implemented, not only being heard, but really being valued, being really seen as equal by the ASEAN leaders as well, and really being seen as a valuable inputs. And that we can say that meaningful public participation is very essential in shaping the policies at national and regional level. And since Forum Asia is a regional organizations, I would like to start talking and by saying an appeal that we are currently facing at the regional level. Because at the ASEAN level at the moment, the regional bloc is currently discussing possibly the first declarations on the environmental rights, or they might
Mm.
call it as the ASEAN Declarations on Environmental Rights or
Mhm.
framework, which might be the first regional document that will govern how the ASEAN member states interpret human rights issues with regards to the environmental rights matters. There have been several discussions, public consultations on these situations, but unfortunately, we have seen that there are several pushback from different ASEAN member states who have been trying to water down and weaken the draft by deleting reference on anti-SLAPP regulations, which is the strategic litigation against public participations, and then deleting recognitions on indigenous people's rights, and deleting recognitions on environmental human rights defenders, just to give you some example on how some people are trying to weaken the draft. And we cannot be silent about this and need to push back,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
that's why ensuring the meaningful public participations are really important. Because as many as consultation that ASEAN can do, if they keep neglecting the real demand on the ground, the real voices of civil society, and if they cannot see CSOs as equal, and they cannot sure that our input will be adopted, this will the whole process will not make any senses. and
Yes, I agree. I
and
agree.
unfortunately, the situations that we are living at the moment for to ensure meaningful participations at the regional level is becoming uh, even more how would I say, even far more than a
Challenging?
realist.
Mm,
Challenging, exactly,
yes,
because we've seen civic space have been shrinking, democratic have been challenging,
yes.
here and there, when there are lots of criminalizations against protesters,
Mm,
criticism against the governments, and so on and so forth, that creates chilling effects against civil society, against those conveying criticism against the governments. So yeah, we're living in a very difficult environment at the moment. So, but I don't want to be very skeptical on these situations.
I agree. I agree. But you continue the fight, which is very good. And for me, it's something that I really admire because despite the challenges that you are facing, the role of CSOs and public participation is equally as important as government officials or state leaders and members when they come up with a declaration, or as you have mentioned a while ago, the draft ASEAN Declaration on the Right to a Safe, Clean, Healthy, and Sustainable Environment. And what is more telling is that it is most proper that CSOs and public participation be involved in the drafting of this declaration because they're the ones affected, directly affected. And you've mentioned a while ago that there have been a lot of criminalization or actions coming from different state leaders when it comes to protesters or people who advocate for the environment, but because of the policies that they implement, would have a chilling effect or have a negative impact on those who are advocating for the environment. So I guess since we're talking about this already, can you share with us any of your experiences, maybe in Forum Asia as well? Maybe you can share with us how you can or how we can effectively mobilize and empower communities, especially the youth nowadays, when it comes to environmental protection.
Okay, thanks, Regin, for that. I think that's a very relevant questions as we are operating in a very uncertain civic space environment in a very challenging situations. One thing that is very sure is we cannot work alone in this kind of situations. In a way that we need to work collectively, we need to work together by establishing together a safe and enabling environment, particularly for the youth to be for the youth, not only for the youth, but also for the most vulnerable and marginalized community as well, to be able to participate in the process. And then as we go along, we need to also assess what are the needs, what are the tools that we need to work on together to create this enabling environment together. So by saying tools, meaning what are the holistic network, not only talking about research, documentations, advocacy, and campaign at the national and regional level, but also about holistic security that also can ensure physical and digital security as well as mental
Mm,
health of the human rights defenders that might be affected, that might also receive reprisal for
mm,
doing human rights uh, advocacy in these issues, because the degree of reprisals received
mm,
by environmental defenders, by communities, by human rights defenders are increasing in unprecedented manners due
mm.
to the shrinking civic space and the raising of authoritarianisms uh, in ASEAN. Therefore, I
And
think by yeah.
this poses as a very, very difficult situation then for environmental protectors because they're being attacked personally, I guess, and now their lives or their liberty are also at stake just because of something that they would want to advocate for. And this is the environment we're talking about. This affects everybody. So I agree with what you have mentioned a while ago, Hanong, and I couldn't agree more when you mentioned that it involves a holistic approach. It doesn't stop where these environmental defenders or advocates are just being stopped with what they say or repressed from what they say, but it also affects their families, also their mental health, their lives, and the way that they go on with life. So, sorry, you were mentioning something a while ago?
Oh yeah. I'm just trying to wrap up that we need to think everything in holistic manners, not only about the advocacy research, capacity building as well, but also on the protection sides of it. By thinking that that's where we as a civil society can answer the needs of the civil society on the grounds, and then by that we can work together and then move together to effectively in mobilizing together for our common causes.
Yes, I agree. And since we've talked about the empowering community, especially the youth and individuals who are advocating for and promoting the environment, and you mentioned already that some governments, for example, they are authoritarian or they seem to be repressing these movements. What do you think are the actions that the government should take then to create spaces for civil society organizations to engage in shaping environmental policies? It
This is
might be, yes, this is probably looking at the perspective, I guess, on the
uh,
on the other side now, and it might be a little difficult, but maybe coming from your experience as someone who is very active from the CSO and public participation, meaningful participation at that. What do you think the government can do, or what do you think is the role of the government then?
from Forum Asia perspective, because we've seen the increase of attempt by the government to criminalize and the use of repressive laws to stigmatize and to deploy negative narratives against CSOs, against environmental defenders, portraying them in different narratives by the
Mm.
use of legislations. We always say, uh, and this might sound like a broken record from our sides, but the first and foremost that the government of Southeast Asia must do is to repeal all of these repressive legislations that have hindered the CSOs, activists, EHRDs to meaningfully participate in any public occasions that hinder their right to public participations, their right to criticize the governments. Because with all of this, it will be uh, it will put their livelihood at risk, because they will be keep criminalized, because all of these regulations are still there. And then the second that the government of ASEAN needs to do as well is to put regulations in place that protects the human rights defenders, such as those that can protect defenders from the slap cases that should be put in place as well. And then the government should also address the persistent issues of impunity in Southeast Asia, and then to provide remedies and justice to the victims of human rights violations against human rights defenders. This must be addressed as well. And lastly, I think in at the ASEAN level, and it is also my appeal, if the government of ASEAN is really serious on talking about the environmental rights protection, then if they would like to adopt the ASEAN environmental rights declarations, or the ASEAN declarations on the right to safe and healthy environments, this needs to be adopted with the most attainable standards that is in accordance with the international human rights standards and principles. Otherwise, then it's going to be another meaningless document of ASEAN, and then it's going to be another meaningless resources.
Indeed, and I couldn't agree more with you, Hanung. So I think this is all coming from your experience, and we're so glad that you could share with us those things, especially in this moment where we need it the most. And I'd like to emphasize that yes, the draft ASEAN Declaration on the right to a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is not just a document, but it should be implemented. It should be upheld by all member states, because this is a product of people of the ASEAN region, the different people coming together to come up with something that is fair for everybody, may it be in the business aspect or the human rights aspect or the indigenous peoples aspect or those from civil society organizations. And I'd like to thank you for that. Thank you for sharing with us, Hanong, your insights on not just this very important milestone in the ASEAN region, which is the declaration, but more importantly, for sharing with us also the struggles of civil society organizations and grassroots communities in the region when it comes to defending the environment. We definitely learned a lot from you in today's episode, and I guess as we're about to wrap up everything, maybe I'll ask you for a few words. Anything that you would like our listeners to hear before we say goodbye to them?
Yeah, I think the battle for the realizations of human rights, particularly for the environment in ASEAN, is a long battle that civil society, not only for Forum Asia, cannot do alone. So this require a collective actions, not only from the civil society, but also from the public, especially for the youth, from the younger generations. So that's why if more people are interested in this long battle, particularly in the what's happening at the ASEAN region with the declarations or with what's happening with ASEAN in general, Forum Asia is much more than happy to give more updates on this. We are more happy to broaden the allyship, to work together with wider stakeholders on this, because again, to be more effective, we need to build strong allyship, strong bonding with different stakeholders, and then because only with that then we can get stronger together against the uncertainty of the future.
Yes, thank you so much, Hanong. And with that, I think we can all hope together for a better future. And yes, it is. It may be a long battle, but it is a battle worth fighting for, because it's not just for the current generation, but definitely for the next, even the next, and even the next generation. So, thank you for encouraging all of us, and I guess that's a beautiful way to wrap up this whole season, actually. And I'd like to thank you again, Hanong, for being our guest for our last episode. We truly appreciate you tuning in, guys. And a big thank you to our speaker again, Hanong, for his wonderful insights for today. To all our listeners, we want to express our gratitude for your continued support throughout this season. Over these 7 episodes, we've explored the challenges and opportunities surrounding environmental rights and climate change in ASEAN. We hope that you were able to get something out of this so that you too can get involved in the movement. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on Spotify to stay updated and never miss an episode. You can also stay connected with us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube by following at WG ASEAN HRMEC. And for more in-depth information, you could also visit our website at ASEANHRMEC.org. Thank you guys so much for a wonderful season 4. We hope to see you again. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged. See you!